Having paid homage to Buddha Shakyamuni, I would like to advise all of ourselves to take a moment and cultivate the highest form of motivation, which we call bodhicitta motivation, or the altruistic motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. With that kind of motivation, we should participate in this Lamrim teaching, teaching on the great stages of path to enlightenment that brings together all the essential points of practice.
Oya denya ta sanja tambe chuji tamni ngaran kalsul ta phagdong kapche ani ina ma yong che da che tanya ro chena ani gajal thondam gi chebar char ma char se yatine ma thone ta dole mangu shen ma yong te yores.
So we are back to volume number 3 in the English translation of Great Lamrim Chemo, the Great Stages of Path to Enlightenment treatise. And we have been discussing how to cultivate special insight or vipassana into the ultimate nature of things, in Tibetan called Hlakthong. And of course, this section in Lamrim dealing with special insight development is very profound section, and we have discussed many important points relating to the objects of negation, what must be negated or refuted in order to understand the ultimate reality. And so one of the things that we talked about quite a bit some time ago has to do with whether or not there is a need to use the term or the adjective, I should say, dendam, ultimate, with regard to object of negation. Do we really need to use the term ultimate or dendam in Tibetan to talk about what needs to be negated or refuted? So we have seen different what we call viewpoints relating to that. Some said yes, you must. Others said, well, it's implied you don't need to do that. So we talked about those debate or arguments.
That in my shundam rabu chevin de kawalindo. Kawa chiri the evena ta Tandia is the Tarshidu de. Tandia Garrison to Sana Shisung the Theatrava, Tanya around the Chabina Yorava. Tandia Garrison to San Tismudua. Rashi Meva Laya, Yan Tabaso, Chaber, Javanis, Rashi Tarang in the Tuba Rashi, never said to Kabra there. Tindeka Gudubala, anything is a Kabi in a ya, Tiro Wonderful day. Any pig, Yan Tagbas. That's okay, not a young Tagasia, Robota, Tinit, Tontambrasia, Robota, Temperature Bassa, Tine, you hear about Chabra Jova, Nisita, Tindiki, Kajali, Chabra, Rancheto Boca, and Duvala. Ani Tontamba, so Chabra Jagu is. Teach Jagu, Yimpati, Yagis, Contu Yagi to Vajik, Yorvata, Karasa, Karindia Bassa. Oh,
LinkedIn
that Karchen Macheda, Candice Ravata, take it, take them to Masev, Shumango Yaris, and Guyasare. Tichagoyaki, Shumango Yaris. That is all in there, so with Lucky Kirava, Songi Kirava, Shumango Yaris. Young Karkari Yusana, here up to Messia, what? Here up to Messia, take Loncara. Page. Daughter with Zabin Girata, daughter with the Bishop, Togambawas, Nisha, Togambaba Nisi, and Mount the Song Yaris, Pigate Tichak over the Mount the Song Yaris, and attached to Ranchit to Tangbango, Mangopa, go over Maimba, until I don't talk about Jaco, do some gently, and tell you to the Kung Tanche. I think the Mount of Song Yaris and Song yesterday.
So we are on page 222 in the third volume of English translated Lumbrim Chemo. And so one of the things that we talked about before, just to refresh our mind, is when we talk about what needs to be negated or refuted, do we need to use the qualifying term or the adjective ultimate, Tamba in Tibetan, to talk about it? So there are masters who advance the notion that we should use the qualifying term or the adjective ultimate, Tamba, and so forth. In the Tibetan word sok, last sok means etc. or so forth. That's a whole, box. It can include a lot of things. And so one of the things we sometimes, different schools use the term, the Rangshinji Duba, intrinsic existence, right? And others might use the term Temper Duba, true existence. Sometimes they might also use the term Yang Tabar Duba, perfect existence. I'm literally translating these terms, right? And then others might use the term ultimate existence. Right? So we encounter these terminologies which may mean the same or different in different schools of thought. According to Baba Viveka, Blaze of Reasoning, he advances the notion that when we talk about the object of negation or what is being refuted, we must use the qualifying term ultimate. Okay? So that's his take on that. And I believe that Chandrakirti seems to agree with that. It is another work called Shirab Tome, the Lamp of Wisdom.
Oh, yeah. 세지 형이 단지 transong아 다티네 세송고도 와양 티tam도 마세베 아니 차브라티 랍지 쫑게 데바 시랍 도멜레 데 송요아리스 디 동탄 바잘 거버디 디값도 야 뚫린다고지 제값을 가르송요아르서나 아 딘디기 디값은 데리 양아 다티 쪼바라 다 쪼반다 잡아 있나 쪼바 쪼고 있나 게데 뭐냐 메바 있나 세다랑 뭐 있어 게데 뭐니 매체네 라기 있나 그 뭐버스니데 간디에 리투 그리스 리투비아요 말이 숨고 살아봐자 그런 게 뭐니면은 때미도 매고야 안 붙이게 공부 코디요 살아봐 뭐니면은 때미도 매도 붙이는데 아니 공부스니데 가르지 뭐니 매비는 공부스니데 용고야 게임도 신디 숨고 살아봐 아 뭐니 매바 있나니 제대로 공부 있니 공부 가르치는 그리스 공부 스니티 인사라 뭐니 듣고 할때 매비 있잖아 공부 매세서 할수 있는 거야리스 제대로 공부 있니 제대로 공부 있나니 뭐니 매바 많이 빼 제대 비치 공부 있도 죽고 있나니 아니 저랑 그 빠지 까야 한다 붙이 까야게 뭐니 매세야지 많이 빼 제가 인상 저랑 그 애니피게 뭐니 매세야게 담자 되니지 동라 애니피게 배 출바 구았다 그랬어 딱 뭐니면은 매고가 인상 다치도 레전드를 딱 건줄 가리네 다지 매버다 붙기 애니피게 저라기 뭐니 매배 담자봤다 된지 아니더라 저 구았다 그도 전에 송도가 돼 구았다 그도 해배 아니 좀 유도 소다 뒤에 송도가 돼
So on page 222, we have a passage quoted from the 15th chapter of Fundamental Treatise, but that's from what I translated as the Lamp of Wisdom, and here translated Lamp for the Fundamental Treatise. Sherab Tume is the Tibetan title of the text. So in that text, an objection has been raised. And let me read that and then translate the explanation given on it. Objection. If things have no essence, how can they be things? If they are things, then they are not without essence. Thus, you have the fallacy of mistakenly denying those objects with the very words within your thesis, unquote. So here the objection that has been raised is that things do exist and they do have essence. The Tibetan term here is ngoni again, which has been translated as having essence or no essence. Okay, and I guess we could substitute that word with intrinsic as well. So if things do not have intrinsic nature or do not have essence in this particular case, they say do not have essence, then how can they be considered as things? Things couldn't be things if they don't have essence or intrinsic nature. But on the other hand, if you do say that things exist, then we have to accept that things do have essence. Okay? The one who is raising the objections, I think, has this central assumption about a reality. They think that if something exists, that thing or those things must have essence, must have intrinsic nature. Okay? Otherwise, those things could not exist at all. Okay? And therefore, from that perspective, so they are arguing, that, well, if you say things don't have essence, then things couldn't exist. But things include a lot of things, right? For example, when we talk about law of karma and its results, belongs to that category called things, If things have no essence, things couldn't exist. That means you can't talk about karmic actions and their results or outcomes. That means you don't believe in the existence of the triple gems or the three jewels, because these are part of, right, specific examples of the categorization called things, But you wouldn't deny the existence of triple jewels. You wouldn't deny the existence of karma, isn't it? So therefore, if you accept those things exist, then you have to accept by default. It says you have to accept, or you do accept, that they do have intrinsic nature. They do have essence. Okay, so that's the what called critique raised here. No.
좀 요도 했어. 제비인다 뭐니 매세야 되게 NPG 고왔다게 좀 요신 다른 거만 주변 쇼도 조여서 말이. 근데 코란도 근데 도반다부터 조여서 말아봐. 뭐보는 뭐니 매도 시 담자와라. 아니 저랑기 뭐니 매도 세와 담자와 들어라. 저기 란직단 계획 좀 요봐라. 最为干的人，最为连就是来是的，他像给你别个给把东西呢，他인지날 가리는 데这边的下下最为인나呢哈过嘛说的吧，인지날 가리요나 데这边的是下，他最为连着不起来干些的，俺写了准备个肯定送药的呢，俺别个这个。동tam방 원이 동tam방 원이 요반이도 켈랑 원이 매반이도 돈잡이 쳐 담 맞잡이 쳤어 인들들 담 원이 매반이도 담 맞잡이 쳐 가르치기 왔습니다 책 타보시 오래 해다도 하고 그러면 되더라 디 같이나 동tam방 원이 요반이도 켈랑 알아봐 담바도바 감 동tam방 원이 도반이도 켈랑 네 아니 ngoni 매스체네 예 담자요 말이스 뒤니 개발이스 ngoni 게 아니 피게지 뭐번 ngoni 요박 켈라네 양조 티샴데 ngoni 매스체네 라비 대비나 데 개발아봤 제단 ngoni도 그래서 뭐번 켈라네 ngoni도 아니 피게 담마잡지스 어다 간지 뭐보니 뭐니 요도 켈라니다 뭐보니 뭐니 맵신 게 담자기 매스 매베 인상 아니 지랑기 꾸와 deputy 예스니 깨지티 아니 제가 차기 미두슨 거야 그래 걔는 담자도 돈을 꾸와 꾸와 맞다베 책에 돈 맞도 땡득게 돈 아니 마두버니 마이노 마인베 델라 좀메도 스파랭 좀 버리스 위마다
다디 총아도 속을 더 로면 랭된 제기 순거로와
딘지로 딘지리
얘기 뭐니도 가서고래 그룹스 가자 뭐보다도 뭐니도 그룹스 랍 양실 두 메스티 랍게 말씀 거로다
리리 그래서 다디 로몬 데기 갈수 그랬다 되어라 봐 뭐 뭐니 되어라 봐 꾸얀 답게 되게 로몬 데리 봐 꼬았다 근데 무슨인데 로본능 되지 엄마 답은 다와서 속 자초그러 와 트위드랍게 와 트위드 달 꼬았다 그 메스
알다 반된 다외
내 뭐보니 돈 담벌 줘봐 요버지 켈랑네 양조 아니 피게지 ngồi 메스인 게 디스기 메스 당부 거는 돈 담벌 줘봐 댕예 켈랜 메스 뭐 있어라 와 dimando
당분에 된 더블 켈랜 메스
라옹라 동tam방 거는 뭐니 요반이도 켈랑네스 아니 뭐니 매반이도 담 맞제 베처스 뭐니 로벌랜데 제 뭐니 되고 시시가 말아 거블랑데 시기요래 링데 익스나 단다데 시기 매스모데 수sun 거다 단다티 반데 다베 단다 바숭 멘로 삼라바 알레론 뭐번은 동tam방 뭐니도 게 켈레네 양조 뭐니 메스는 게디 겐두티 랍게 메스 로번 랭데 제 반대 다왈 선데 반대 다베 니 식승메스 Okay, so this gets very terse. I have to make sure whose perspective we're talking about. Otherwise, it started to make no sense at all, you know. Khensur says, you know, even the phrasing of the things here are very technical and very difficult, you know, to explain. So here, it is as if Baba Viveka and Chandrakirti are in dialogue or in debate, whatever you want to call that. And so Chandrakirti, you know, puts an objection to Baba Viveka that, you know, if things have no essence, then they can't be things. Okay, so that objection, you know, is put by Chandrakirti to the Baba. Sorry. What I'm saying, no. Baba Viveka puts to Chandrakirti, if things have no essence, then they could not exist, right? Because Baba Viveka asserts that things must have intrinsic essence, right? And so Chandrakirti is now responding to that, you know. You seem to point out contradiction in my position because you assume that I said
that things do not have essence, and then I'm kind of contradicting myself. But that's not the point. Chandrakirti says that I have never accepted that things ultimately have any essence or intrinsic reality. So therefore, the critique that you're labeling on me, it really does not hold water, if you will. If you look in the middle of the page 222, where it reads, we did not claim that things ultimately have essence, and then advance the thesis of essencelessness. So Chandrakirti is saying that, I'm not self-contradicting myself. I did not say somewhere that things have essence or intrinsic reality, and then later I changed my position that they are essencelessness. If that's the case, then you're right. I'm self-contradicting myself. But we never, claimed that ultimately things have essence or intrinsic reality. So therefore, the kind of the fallacy that you are pointing out in my position is not a valid one. Okay, it's not valid, and so the fallacy that you pointed out, it does not apply to us. So therefore, it cannot undermine, right? It cannot undermine our position, our meaning Chandrakirti and colleagues.
나 인벌 차야. 와. 다 디샴데 가르송도. 좀 매도 해서 봐. 뭐버나 돈 담방고니 매반이든 되베. 다 반대 다와서 버터게. 뭐버니 돈 담바 가서 뭐니 매반 되그리. 너비 인자 뭐니 매나 때니 매거게 꼬았다 거야 개미도 꼬았대 그 매순 거 있어요. 꼬 맞다 버려 힘이 철나. 반대 다와서 꼬았다 거야 개개요 말이야. 뭐니면 매거야 때니 매거야 돼. 사람도 너바르마도 녀도 같게 말이야. 간세 다와서 그게 뭐니 매번 되베 꼬았다와 애니게 꼬 맞다 버려 힘이 철. 꼬았다 거야 민도. 타이도 랑게 오트베 뭐니 매나 군데스 heebra selos ta tesidu ta amache khadi khasungita tanidu ke ranjubi inaya omar ranjubi so bai tal wolin denda buchi inaya tanidu rangi ngo tube ngoni metrona ani kundib yimbati korangi heji sigi yubati sebori ya se ach sungu isare
lost the young Jewish Canada.
Go what my hip church in Vala, then draw Tarachke, Church. That is him there, telling to ranking old to the moon manner, couldn't have su hebra, sailor sundoa.
Long.
What did that? That is Carson, Lobon, in danger, Tabutiki, and people. Telling to ranking only maybe any made to Danny made to Kundipki. Dog say at the Lobon did shave at the savory. Long.
So then, as the dialogue or the conversation goes here, so Chandrakirti, okay, thing, the Baba Viveka, who asserts that things have intrinsic essence or nature. Okay, for Baba Viveka and colleagues, if things do not exist intrinsically, then they could not exist at all. That, if you don't accept the intrinsic essence of things, then you are undermining the conventional existence, right? You are denying even the conventional realities, okay? So that's not acceptable to Baba Viveka and his colleagues. Are you with me? Yeah. So from that point of view, assertion and opposition, Baba Viveka is telling Chandrakirti, right, that you have to accept there is intrinsic essence of things. Otherwise, then you become the nihilist. You will end up denying even the conventional existence of things. Okay, so that's the argument. But Chandrakirti and his colleagues says, you know what? Well, no, that fallacy doesn't apply to us. We assert that things do not have intrinsic essence, but things could still exist. Okay? It's only in your position, because you assert that things must have intrinsic essence, and if they don't, then they couldn't exist. But in our position, that fallacy is not there, because we don't accept that things have intrinsic essence or reality. Nonetheless, they could exist conventionally. Okay? So those are two different perspectives on looking at the reality. Okay. Bonus.
어, 대지 타지 있지, 그러라. 아, 쉐버 셀로시. 양 텐니레스 야지. 양 텐니레 쉐르부터 메 텐니레 숨기. 들어봤다. 양 텐니레 돈 담바나. 라게 오봉 오니 메바니 니데 쉐베처다. 다지 꾸디 알았다. 다딴 좀 뭐지 그거라 돈도 꾸베네 장게 오봉은 지지. 돈 담방 오니 메데 쉐바인 비처스 따고 그랬어. 다티 가서 그러다 돈 담바 유나 수독도 되베 아니 뜨미도 수독도 되베게 공업부 공식 이유고 발라 그 수독도 맞르베 현라 뜨니 현 규제 현지 제발라 때니 접고도 발라 때니 쉐바인 비처스 쉐네 따지 꾸브라스 제세도 레벨라 제바인 비처 당스 다다 찍고 그러바다로 다 찍지 잡아 다 규진 현라 때니 간지 현직을 때니 두버리 마도 찍게 수도랑도 두버 말이 있는데 뒤직 다 찍지 다르버 또르다 제바인 비처를 찍고도 할래 아니야 양찍라 애니 피게디 다 찍을 듣고 연설다 제바인 비처 당 주바 제버지 땜번 니라 또바다 제비 처 뭐야 다티 예tan chirang go karine cheba imbe chirl siagi tra jobati tra chebra chensi cheba sidu bal kora 그 randuki madubegi 규제 현직이 chebala ya ten dukku bati 진도 joba chebra chen res joba chebra chenti ani sienla pige teba sienla temba 제비 처럼 왔다 니 소리 거도 뭐니지 맞도데 저바 제바지 아니 자 땀반이라 또바디 제비 처럼 왔다 디 대체다 니 소리 거다 동도 야니 가르쳐 줘잖아 뭐니지 저바 요 말이 주제 천지 땐 전이 제바리 저바 제바지 제바세야 되기 되기 아니 피게지 현라 땀바디 현라 또바디 제바 두베 처리스 다 니티르발 페나 멜론나 페나 가사 좀마 페나 좀마 켄지 두베 아니 미신노 스페티르다 페나 좀마 켄지 두베 미티 가르치기 하잖아 안 티치기 하레스 나란도게 제 나제지 맥레베 데모 같은 게 인데스킨 따윤디 발라 피게니 가르치디나 제 미나 랑보체나 따윤나 세이나 가르치디나 등원에게 비해지 요번부터 나도 통계하래. 제경 나제기 밀레베 광기. 그 뒤파저디 통야디 거리온 게 통버렸잖아. 나제기 밀레베 때 데비 갈사 데모가 또 나제기 밀레바다 파저기 제기 투기 근데 담면다 sö네 나도 통버레 마도 지라 파저 원에 나도 때변나 희기 요아레베서나 요 말이스 거기 제단 비게지 담면다 써야기 투자절라 뛰니 두바리티 요 말이스 거예요.
So towards the bottom of page 222, we have a passage quoted from Chandrakirti's Lamp of Wisdom, where it says the same text says, right? That is in Tibetan Sherab Terme, which means the light of wisdom or the lamp of wisdom. And so in this passage, what we see is that Chandrakirti is putting some logical proposition to Baba Viveka, if you will. Okay? And where it says, ultimately, internal things lack essence because they are produced, reason number one, and also because this distinctive statement of their being produced indicates that they are contingent upon the dependent. For example, they are like the humans, etc., that a conjurer has emanated, unquote. So what commentary Khensur was given on this is, so we can say things, ngobo, as a topic or a subject, do not have essence or intrinsic essence, let's say, which they predicate. Why? So two reasons are given. Why? Because Number one, they are produced. Okay, if something is produced, right, then that thing cannot exist on its own in and of itself. Okay, and the number two, where it says there is this distinctive statement, meaning when we really pay a close attention to the term production or something produced, it has a connotation that something's to be produced, that several things have to come together, right, in order to produce something. Yeah? So if something is produced, let's say things, whatever things are, they are produced, then that tells us that they couldn't, right, exist on their own, or that they couldn't have produced on their own. So they are dependent phenomena. Okay? That shows us that things are what called the existence of things is contingent upon other factors. Okay? That's what Chandrakirti is trying to point out to those who assert intrinsic essence of things. An example given is probably that might help us to understand it better, is that of how a magician can create illusory phenomena in front of us, right? And the example given here is a skilled magician, produce a beautiful human being right in front of us, or it could be elephant or horses or snake or whatever, just make it. And those of us who are at the magic show, because we are spellbound by the magician, because magicians, they have some kind of mantras they recite or whatever they do, and then we all see the same thing. There are horses and elephants here. There are beautiful human beings. Okay? And they appear to us as if they exist there, right? They exist there on their own, because there's like a human being over there, there's a horse, there's an elephant, whatever, okay? But in reality, there is no real human being there. There is no real elephant. There's no, it's just a magic show. And that magic show is a contingent phenomena because it's produced by the magician, magician's skill, mantras, and whatever materials, the magic wand, or whatever they use. Yeah? So just like that, when something is produced, if we accept that things are products or are produced, then what that tells us, according to Chandrakirti, is that they couldn't, right, exist on their own. They cannot have intrinsic essence because something else has contributed to their existence. Are you with me? Yeah, so that's what Chandrakirti is trying to point out to the essentialist.
다지 가서도 돈도만 뭐뭐뭐지 왔다리 다지 저기야 다지 도도 좀 다지 가득라 지 가르친 게 알아서는 다치향이 저 뉘제도 먼저 가르쳐버 이나야 아니 뭐니도 또 봐요 말이 매베 때게 때전 현라对比起来现在过比인자다 자시 값이 이나야 대송여로 다 가서 강제리 그래 강제 간실 땐중 마인배 총과 유보 마인너 간실 디실 땐 동반 마인배 총과 유보 마인너 스타타 디제주리다 나란서 다 제장 제주다 다对你知吧对你知吧지금 마도 저기 수도도 들어간다고 지 규정이야 맨도 지금 디바 다 제주로 왔다 총과 유보 마인너 진짜로 제단다 디 안데 전pana 시 가르쳐 그러다 뭐버이 나인다 시지 가르치기 지셔라 왔다 나도 시 현라 바라를 된다와디 아니 가르쳐 버려 제베이나 아니 비 지시게 됐대 랑게 원이 아니 가르쳐 되게 되게 시티 아니 비 현라 때니 줘봐 인자 현라 마템바 원이 줘봐디 동바리 다도도르부터 대삼을 땅거도 아군이부터 인게 와친 랑경오니 현라 때네 랑경오니도 두고 봐이나 현라 마템바 랑경오니지 주베 동바리 어텐다와 될라 아니 가르치기 있잖아 제 땡중 동배 통도야 차주암 제 두번더부지 현라 초고 만들어 삼게도 와 초고 만들어 삼게도 다 땡중 동배전도 오나다 티 똥바 이나 랑기 뭐 라 말레베 뭐니지 투지 똥바 레세 레버다 땡중데 똥베 돈도 차들이 다 신가식 독재지 똑바 짬지 독재지 똑바 짬지 짬레 아니 피게지 탄이도 자지 대봐 탄이도 자지 나도 대봐지 다 자지 대봐 여러 자지 대봐 여봐데 안피 똥바디야 땡중 거 돈도 차주 현행 두고 요사레스 대이나다 말도 텐데 이바이나 다 간대리 아니 매번 많이 봐 그게 지금 독재지 똑베 딱봐 짬다 추 간데 간이나 독재지 떡베 딱봐 짬지게 토니 아니 자지 태누여다 제레준데 이네한테 가리네 자지 태누여 근데 태버티 아니 가르도다 가서 태버 자지 그 태버티 아니 다 똥바디야 땡중 거 돈도 차주유세나 되지 말도 상거도스
So Khensur Rinpoche beautifully quoted two lines of the stanza from Fundamental Wisdom Treatise by Arya Nagarjuna, which basically states that everything is dependent arising. There is no single phenomenon that has not dependent arising. Everything is emptiness. There isn't any phenomenon that is, not empty. Okay? And so that is really, those two statements are core of understanding what emptiness is, shunyata is. Where we really often hear, masters talk about that dependent arising, tendals, pratit samutpad, and emptiness, they're very complementary to each other, isn't it? In a sense that dependent arising is emptiness, emptiness is dependent arising. Yeah? So if we can understand how these two terms are very complementary and they embody the meaning of what emptiness is, then we really come to have a pretty good understanding of what emptiness is. Yeah. And so we can take any phenomenon as our focus of investigation. The Tibetan call it shi, or the basis, right? In order to investigate, we must have something to investigate. That's the basis, right? So X factor, whatever that is. Yeah. And so whatever that X factor is, if we say that, it exists dependently, that means its existence is dependent on some other factors. Yeah. So that tells us whatever that thing is X factor, it couldn't exist on its own, independently, okay, intrinsically, on its own, because it is dependent upon some other things. Yeah. And so when we analyze any phenomenon, and we come to see that every phenomenon we're talking about, has a dependent nature, or is a dependent reality. And because of that, we can say that every phenomenon is devoid of intrinsic nature, right? Because things exist dependently, so therefore things are devoid of intrinsic essence or reality. Okay, so that's one way to understand emptiness. Look at emptiness from dependent arising point of view, perspective. Are you with me, right? That's why we often say dependent arising is one of the best tools, or maybe the best tool, or the reasoning to access what emptiness is. But in another sense, we say that emptiness, could be understood in terms of dependent arising. Dependent arising is emptiness, emptiness is dependent arising. So those are the two claims we are making. So how can we understand that? Dependent arising is emptiness, if you will. So this is where we really go to the, if you will, the deepest understanding of what dependent arising means. So it comes to the what called mere labeling of things. Things are merely labeled. Okay, that's how they exist. Okay, everything is imputed. Everything is merely imputed by terms and concepts. That's how they exist. Nothing more, nothing less. Okay? And if you can accept that notion, then things just function fine. Okay, there are good karmas, there are bad karmas. Good karmas bring good results, bad karma bring bad results. Okay, whatever. So all those things become feasible, on the ground that everything is merely labeled onto by terms and concepts. Okay, so if we understand that subtlest interpretation of what dependent arising is, then we'll start to see that emptiness is dependent arising. Okay, so that's how we can see the complementary nature of emptiness and dependent arising. Norms.
다디 다시지. 시랑기 가서 시랑신 고발라 토마탄비 개발 예발 조비처럼 다디 기지들 장거리 다 간지 라신 땅방고 많이 받달라 개발한 저버데 돈 탐바기 개발할 다 흉도도 관계 있는데 막 자주도 예발도 잘 비처럼 데려발라. 다디요 된 디송도 와다 야 들라 가리송 거요나 들라 돈 담바를 매집에 돈이 수치더니 다시 같이 제발 돈 담바를 매세야기 간제들이 미주 즉 그럼 매왜 그게 매세야지 유세야 매세야지 지 젠점 좀 간제적 돈이 용거라 숨신이 지와저부지 맨로 생기라 와라 달라 돈 담바를 매집에 돈 너니 인도 치더니 저한테 가르치 돈 담바를 매세야기 미투 간디스케니 메레스나 아테유스 배 안도 결로텔라 취진다 취진 많이 봐 망고 시자저를 돈도 많이 봐 간절로 돈주암 로 취진기 로 취진되기 시럽기 아니 피게 쥐베 리베 넘버 제나 아니 피게 되가서다 제나 대 유버라 들베 대 유버라 마투발라 제반이 로본디 탐지에기 톰바이노 어때대 쟁쟁지와 소소독비 시랍 마두줄리 시랍지요 찌독비 시랍 땅독비 시랍 걔는 가두줄리 시랍 야이 로카시까지 찌운주니 시랍 첨부된데 요아리 생나마 시랍을 봐니 비게지 콤지 첨부 용게 정도 찌독비 시랍 걔네 양직 메시인베인데 다 멘트업질 차샤라 바간게 유주야리 인 멘트업질 차샤비네 양직 기마탄네 제 현을 뛰먹고 양직 때 지단 뛰먹고 왔다 말아 그러 뛰디와리 때 얘네야 제 정독이 시랍해야 돼 전부 용게 된대요 아리 찌독이 시랍해야지네 다 만족이 인디베게지 곰니 야 시랍디야 째주네 된대게 짝 된대게 아니 비게 수신도 줘베 르베 넘버 10 다티 가자티 둡나 인디레치 두고도 게 요다 매 째니 인데 째 유튜브라 다돈 담버 가르쳐 그랬다 매버티 비게 니 용기 알아봤다 르베 넘버 7바나 아니 비게 대 요바라 마두발라 제바네 달제 야야 딘데 돈 담버를 잡이인다 아디지 로본링 된제도 나와고 나자 로모 관계게 톰바리스 관계지 요나 에네 코 유미 제 쟁겐 디 몰라 요 고발레 기 매비 인상 다디 디 몰라 매비 인상 다디 미둑제네 단라와지 두버 미둑제네 아니 그렇다 로본 관계 톰바이 노신 제승구에서래 제다디 지디다디 저 쟁겐 디 제니 많이 비인사 다디 연예인이 거를 땡게디 몰라 연예인이 거를 때 매비인사 다디 많이 버도 돈 담바 마두버리 어야 다디 간제해는 맞잖아 로티기 제니 로티 수십대 마선디 제니 양탁버 수십대 마선디 제니 디 모르 매비인사 다 민두 제니 찬디 시초요사래 제니 송고요사래다 So at the bottom of page 222, I'll just read the lines first and then translate the commentary given on that. Thus, he definitely adds the qualification ultimately in the refutation of intrinsic existence. With regard to this, all of these masters agree that something is not existing ultimately means that when a reasoning consciousness properly analyzing its ontological status
places it under scrutiny, that consciousness does not establish its existence, and unquote. Okay? I mean, there's a lot of things to deal with. So let's see if we can simplify this a little bit here. In a general sense, if we are going to talk about something exists, something doesn't exist, then we must have some criteria by which we can say, right, if something fulfills this criteria, then we can verify that that thing exists. Or if something does not fulfill this criteria, then we can say, okay, these things don't exist, right? We should have some, like a set of criteria, whatever, in our mind to be able to differentiate between existence and non-existence. Okay? In the same way, when we talk about things don't exist ultimately, or ultimately, right, things don't exist, then we must also have a set of criteria, if you will, to understand, what do we mean that things don't exist ultimately? The Tibetan term is Tön Tampar with the particle ra. Okay? It's not Tön Tampa, okay, as in ultimate reality, but it's Tön Tampar as in things don't exist ultimately. Okay? So what is, how do we judge? Then as we are debating about that, things, have no essence, things have essence. So how do we determine the distinction between things have intrinsic essence or not, right? Now, one thing that all masters, regardless of what schools they subscribe to or they kind of represent, they all agree that there are certain what called wisdom or perceptions that deal with the ontological status of phenomena. Okay? So whatever assertions we make, if we say something exists this way or that way, right, then when we put that phenomenon under scrutiny or analysis, then that particular reasoning mind or the wisdom should be able to find it and validate it. Yeah, yes, things have intrinsic reality. Here I go, right? I'll put my stamp on here or signature here, right? You know what I mean, right? That's what all the masters agree. They said when we deal with the ontological status of things, we all agree there are certain reasoning mind or wisdom that involves in analysis, and that wisdom must find, right, what the truth of the matter is. Okay? And if it doesn't find that, that means it doesn't exist in the way we said it exists. Okay? And so now when we put the notion of ultimate existence under the scrutiny, right, under this kind of analysis, we called it analytical analysis by the wisdom, right? By the way, Khensur just said that if we look inside us, there's all different types of perceptions and minds exist in us. It's the whole world in itself. We have what we call a lot of valid perceptions. We have a lot of invalid perceptions. We have wrong, misconceptions, as well as we have correct perceptions. All of those things, okay, exist within us. So when we're dealing with analysis, we can't use any what we call misleading perceptions or the erroneous perceptions to do the analysis. We have to use the proper state of mind. We call Töntumba, right? The state of mind that deals with factual things. Okay? So we have to use the valid state of mind dealing with facts and figures, so to speak. Okay? And that's why we often talk about what we call wisdom that deals with the ultimate nature of things, okay, reality. So if things were to exist intrinsically, okay, in and of themselves, as if out there, almost telling us, hello, I'm here, you have nothing to do with me, right? This is who I am, kind of thing, right? As if like things are telling us that I exist independently, I have nothing to do with anybody else, hello, here I am, okay? So now if we believe in that, that's how it exists, right? And that's called an ultimate existence or, things having essence. Now we put that notion under analysis. Do things really exist that way? Just that they said, hello, I'm here, and we believe in that. This is how it exists. When we put it under analysis, we couldn't find it to exist that way. That means we got it wrong, right, in terms of attributing how things should exist or do exist, okay? If things were to exist intrinsically, then under the ultimate analysis, we should be able to find it and verify and put our signature here. Yes, here, this is how it is. Are you with me? Yeah, I know there's a lot of things to deal with. But so Khensur Rinpoche also said with regard to the wisdom, and there are all types of wisdoms, and sometimes we also believe in what we call wisdom, by birth. Of course, those individuals who are very smart right from the birth, in some way they are much smarter than a lot of other people. In this life, they didn't do much anything, right? They're kind of young and whatever, right? Of course, this is the result of many of their previous lifetimes, at least in this life. So they have certain level of wisdom which other people don't have. It's called wisdom by birth. Okay, then certain wisdoms are cultivated through education and training and contemplation and so other things. Okay, the last thing Khensur Rinpoche said here is so when we look at object of negation, we really have to make sure, what is object of negation? Okay, gakcha in Tibetan. Okay, we have to precisely identify object of negation, and then once we have identified it, we should have that clear image of object of negation, and then say whether things exist in that mode or not. Okay, and then we can put that under ultimate analysis. But if we are kind of fuzzy about the object of negation, then the ultimate analysis doesn't work. Okay, very clearly.
오, 다시 가발이 송골. tumba ino se atraba. 다시 샴디에 디슨 것도 와다. 내 척척보시라도 가리나 하고 그러면 됐다. 대난 로본디 숑남수 앙 대코나니 통화다. 제수 tumbe 제법 마죽 바라. 꼰좀 적바 대다라. 숭라시도. 다시 딱 지라 하고 그러면 가리송교나 tena lobon di shung na solo mo panal den tak shung ne tabu chabi na ya che te khona ni thoma de jesu thunde si de kunjop che jok ban na te khona ni ge chö ba na sin ki che ban da te manje bar ani phi che khar so ta lu che ba himur che ba majuk bar ani phi che kunjo jok ba sung gu kunjo jok ba sung las tinde chi metro sam da di tik di
So down the top of page 223, at least when we look at the way even Baba Viveka approaches the two realities, conventional reality, right, Samvritti Satya, and ultimate reality, Paramartha Satya, the approach seems to be the same as other masters. And that is like when we deal with conventional reality, we call Khensur, conventional phenomena, there is no need for the kind of analysis that we are required to do to talk about ultimate reality. So conventional reality is pretty much accepted more or less, in a sense, what the world agrees upon, right? And there's no need for some kind of analysis. So that position approach, Baba Viveka also agrees, okay? And that would be, Khensur Rinpoche didn't say that, but my understanding is the same as what the Chandrakirti would say, In order to establish conventional reality, there is no need to engage in some kind of ultimate analysis or any that sort of analysis. No.
Okay, 다른 영국과 티 라시영국의 제리베 넘버 줘봤나? 대미시 송바 마웨나 아니 베게 대다다 남 대다다 남만 남라오 다른 힘에 바까 윤디 발라 안티 비게지 리베 제바 제도 비게 다 제바 제네 네 뒤로부터 신 네 제바 제네 리베 제바 넘버 줘봤나 안티 메바티 가서 송바 이제 망보리 세상다 공부协배 제 대유와 가서 최신도 접에 시랍스 가지고 전도 제바다 제바통도 아니 나마탄 저기도 송가 인사래
다든데 디 커쇼래 된 담배신데 로벨링데 지시고로라로와
라리
계시 가서보다 디소다 단디 ngoñu mandu basu mar ngoñu duba 까바이나 디 에나 가서고래 타도 주제기 안에 녀데 많이 버지 거사이더라 디 시시고로 로벨링데 지
공대라
No.
어 가서 흉태나서 대코나니 통한다 제주 통바세야 되빌라
Long tanda di the tendam dem sonage medwe. The kunsa dem di sa shu de tanda di. Presenti. Di yang just kana ron mashi.
대디 학교 맞 가.
Tanda di exam.
내가 돈 담바를 매집에 돈인데 인도에
long
시스타이 있으라 들어봐.
long.
내가 돈 담바를 매집에다 매야 가리리 있어. 다 뒤와서 리브리스.
No.
뒤와서 리브이나 따디 가서 그러다. 요 말했지. 랜드 규시 파트지 요 말했지 말이. 그 제게 요라지. 요 안도 맞도 요 말했어야 돼. 요 레서야 돼. 취집에 리페 주고요. 리페 제바 인자 대 요바라 마두바데 아니 비게 가서다 루본 링겐제 이나인다. 루본 다와 타발아서 보이나이. tumbudu sen sungu sares
Ale chen disor ke zum je tapena global lengden chegi karsong ngoni de duba shegi shigi orwa
o tetari thon tambar matu bat
la tenda ba
matu wal bolin de chegi shigira ba
al ten tambar madu ba shigi orwa
o ti matu bi ati khande ri chene tujin chebe rigbe cheba chetop ki chiko bati lobon dawa thak ba ine nda lobon kharse ta lengden chi ine tumbudu se at mando
and tandi orwa ko global lengden chegi ta rangan de duba shegi shigi orwa
la re ri
ta rangan de duba di ane kasa tanda di tendam chuje ki seme ki endeli ya cheba che indu ka ni mar ba ni res ni mar so da
돈담 쥐쥐지 세메랑 줘봤대 니기리세요.
니그러서 알레.
로본 인게지잖아 seguin다. 당당은 마두베네 네 내국도 잔지 토대 야시라기 송타송아.
Okay, I think I will make sure that I understood the statement here. So on page 223, right on the top, maybe I should read the whole passage first and then translate what Khensur just said. Therefore, even the texts of Baba Viveka, in positing conventionality, say such things as, without engaging in analysis that accords with perception reality. So in other words, in order to establish conventional realities, Baba Viveka also talk about how we don't need to do ultimate kind of analysis. Okay, so agreed upon. Now the next one says, when refuting intrinsic existence, they often say, does not exist under rational analysis. Thus, these statements and those of the former masters are similar. I think the term Dön Tamba, I think Baba Viveka accepts that things exist from its own side, but do not accept things exist ultimately. Are you with me? If you don't get that distinction, then we can get completely confused. Okay? Baba Viveka accept that things exist from their own side, but things don't exist ultimately. Okay? And then we asked them, how do we know things don't exist ultimately? He said, well, if you put it under the ultimate analysis, we don't find it to exist. So that's good enough for me. Okay? So on that ground, if something is put under ultimate analysis and the wisdom in the ultimate analysis couldn't verify its existence, then it doesn't exist that way. And that approach is acceptable to both Baba Vivekas and Chandrakirtis and all others. Okay, so that's why I was just trying to figure out what does that thing mean here. Okay, Lawrence.
다들 막 달로 시작인다 디시다 하고 말다디 타고 싶어도 원자 랑게 뭐도봐 도발라 인두죄에 리페 줘봐 리페 제수도 리페 제수도 켈레 그 메고 아니게 가사 메고 미트윈터 벨라 메고 미트윈테스 라바 로본 데니치스 달로 가리네 페제 로본 다와 타발 소바게 가리네 로본 데니게 랑게 뭐지 좀 도발라 테코나니라 쮸베 리페 쮸베 차바나 돈담디 도바라 차바라 시때 나라 시바 망도 시바 따로스 다티 가르송기나 원자 랑게 뭐 쮸베 쮸베 리페 넘버 쮸바나 다 리페 제수도 켈랑 고보다 미크베티지 제바른도 송고였어요. 아타코니 그 돈 탐버 dum나 딘데지 줍고도 스리페 제윤도 튕긴 라버시 여비나야 다 제베게 타는 아버지 릭베 제수도 좀 맞추니 부들라 제브라지 녹송게 매도 제브라지 녹세 고메고 미티데 송도와 고니 먹으면 미티데 달로본 나와 작발로 소바 알로본 되니지 달로본 되니지 랑고지 두발라 테코나니라 주베 릭베 제수지 차바나 다 주제기 릭바티 제네 간디 유미 바 제네 제일 두발다 거라지 그냥 개디 뭐니지 두부 유부이나야 주제기 릭바티 뭘 요구요 다데 티응을 매베도 땅 뭐니지 마두버지 진짜 나티 제수도 아야 다란주비선 티케 랭 매면도 다디 세부시야 민두 제수지 타바나 돈담들 두바 찹장 돈담들 두베 차버리 시베에서 아니 피에지 제수도 두베네 돈담들 두고 알고 리베 제바 지게 안 되면 그 제수 뒤에 거도 요나 돈담들 두고도 와스 그 돈도 안 되면 맞아 제바 친게 뒤에 걸라 계속 그게 제 요바이나 돈담들 두고도 세네 송게 만도 다티 가르쳐 버다 ngara mangdu sheba ngara mangdu sheba tar ro che ta tige chik zo ru gu sar chik zo je yang sa je hin da chik go li gi sar o ti ne ma ting go de ma da ya gu chi je ha ko ge me de xiong ta gu re ya xik song da de ma
ko da ken som de tang ma de ya tan da lo men de da ge is lo wa
la wo
ane ngo ni de dru ba ina ane ka so ra tan dam je de be ngo li ya dru ko shig ma ris chik de ba de be na
lo won de da gi xiong lo won 로원 디 흉남 써야 되베 랑주비 흉남 쓰기 유지라 봐 로원 써야 돼 로원 랑주비 랑주비 흉남 써 하여튼 게 단지 시작 학고면도 휴비 봐 대코나니 통화데 지수 틈에 제바 맞죽 버려야 돼딱 건접진 저 유도 봐 대코나니를 제바 제도긴 저바 나지 저 고고요 말이스 근데 송샤 쓰기면도 양반이 저 유도 건접 저 유도 봐라 제바 제도기 시작이 비 대코나니를 제바 제도 그 가서다 줘야 돼 저고고요 말이스 대승면도 왔음
The last passage on page 223, I was trying to check once again for the explanation on the first couple of lines. Let me read that passage, it's very terse. However, these masters do not agree as to whether something that exists essentially must be held capable of withstanding scrutiny by rational analysis of its ontological status. As I have explained at length above, the two masters, Buddhapalita and Chandrakirti, hold that something that exists essentially must be able to withstand scrutiny by rational analysis of reality, hence must also be established ultimately. The Khensur Rinpoche said, he's not very sure about how to explain the first part of this passage, where he says, however, the masters do not agree as to whether something that exists essentially must be held, right, capable of withstanding scrutiny by rational analysis of its ontological status. It's a whole mouthful to say. But the later part is quite clear, where according to masters like Buddhapalita and Chandrakirti, if something exists ultimately or intrinsically, right, then we have to put it under ultimate analysis, and then the wisdom that is involved in the ultimate analysis must be able to find that things do exist intrinsically or ultimately. But according to these masters, the wisdom doesn't find them to exist ultimately or intrinsically, which means things do not exist ultimately and intrinsically. So that's very clear to Baba Viveka and Chandrakirti. Now the first part, where Khensur Rinpoche, he's really not so sure about, how to explain that part. And for me also, it creates a little problem with me as a translator, For the way I understand it, now this is translator's footnote, okay, so don't put it with the commentary. To me, it sounds like these masters, meaning the Baba Viveka and his, colleagues, that if something exists intrinsically or essentially, we do not have to put it under ultimate analysis. Sounds like that's what it is, But I'm also not really sure about that. So we have to maybe you have figured out what it is, and maybe you can share that a little later as we yield to you. Okay. Okay, so we are going to yield to you, and then because the next one, new chapter in English starts, chapter 18. So it's called Misinterpretations of the Sevatantrika and Prasangika Distinction. Right? So we won't go there today. Okay, so we are yielding to you. The traveling mic is over there. No. Yeah, so Khensur says, yeah, so that part he's not very sure at this point, and he just wants to go back to you. Maybe you might have figured it out, so feel free to share your interpretation, and so we all have to figure out.
Yeah. Well, there seems to be a discrepancy between the Tibetan text and what we are reading here. I don't know. For example, the whole section, there is no mention of Chandrakirti. A number of quotes were actually not from Chandrakirti. Specifically, there's here from Bhava Viveka, not from Chandrakirti.
Okay.
So this is kind of a general, but yeah, okay. Well, there are many other questions.
I think the point here is Khensur thought that the light of the wisdom treatise, or the lamp, we translate here, he thought it's by Chandrakirti, but now he's not very 100% sure, but he thinks it is. So that's why he...
Yeah, okay, but that changes everything. That implies that Bhava Viveka is making these assumptions, these statements. So, I mean, everything is kind of very convoluted, but basically we were told that according to Bhava Viveka, things exist intrinsically, but not ultimately. Okay, but there are many statements here, many statements, where it says that Bhava Viveka refutes intrinsic existence, which is the opposite.
Makes no sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, for example,
yeah, that's why I said it's getting
many.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I wish I can go and look at both sides and see what's in Tibetan and there. 다 두대 두지 세베나 최담제 랑원의 주바인 된 담발 주메서 거 봐서 라로와 다이네 디나 인지나 줄데 있는 다가 가셔라 이번에 야 샴바도 로벤 랭데 제기 다 랑원의 주바 시기 말해서 그러던 되는 거도 와 제주고 나고 다디 표현할 가면 디페 성장 테스트도사 인지나 데다 디 칼게
데 성장이라도 성장 들다나 팀에 가서 다 이시세 그 팀에 다가 규샤 되나 저 제가 제가 좀들 팀에 단디 내 til tujun la run jora ba lam ring po ti nge sha le mang po yu po som de ba le sha le po mang po yu po zhui na ju han de zhap jie yu din de al ti lam ring chemo chema xin ge ma tu xie yin ba re sam jing de li du ba la re min du de zhong zhong mang po jia xi xia ya ma na ni chen ji ra ni di na ni ka xie de ba de na ni nge ha ko me ma to ji la de dan di tuya ta wa ni min du 가서 지나는 지 망보시에도 와디 종종 망보시도 디나 맹게 망보시에야 디세다 디니에디 하고 메스
So Khensur agrees with you that maybe one way is to verify, right, that the translation with whichever version of the Lamrim in Tibetan they used, sometimes with different versions of the Lamrim, there may be some slight different the wordings, and some have more footnotes and explanation, things like that, So, but that's the important point you're raising. We need to verify.
Yeah. Well, it's also, for example, on page 222, just before the last quote from Baba Viveka's lamp for whatever, he holds that he does not mistakenly, and that's he is Baba Vivek according to our text, that he does not mistakenly deny things due to his assertion that things lack its essence ultimately. So it's clear that he, and this is the important part, he asserts that it would be a mistaken denial to say that they lack essence, but conventionally. So basically what we're getting from this passage is that what Baba Viveka is saying is that things do not exist intrinsically ultimately, but they exist intrinsically conventionally. Yeah. Okay, and that would make sense. If that is the case, that we go back all the way back, and that would make sense where to apply the term ultimate to the object of negation. Otherwise, it doesn't, for Prasangika, it doesn't make sense to apply that.
Maduba. Ye. Temper Matuba He, Yan Tapper Matuba He. Ranchi Tuba He. The Sigdo. That ten you as in a Kazani, Chick Yorba. Read the Koran and Ranju Koranki, Chenzam Ravi Shani. Kajani, ten you at Anna Kajani, Chiba Imba Kankigla, Ranjuve Yanchi, Kaye, Kaye, Mihib to do.
But this is what I want Robert Langdon Chegis Larva, Karsore, Chetamje, Rango the Druba saying did what? Rango the Druba Shake or what? Rango the Druba did Tanya want to use. Larva.
Oh, Ori.
Tanya want the Rango the Druba, Shed the Rango Rubusungwa.
Lady.
Then we want to Shed the Rango the Madusungwa.
A tondam, Tontamber to a mason.
Turn did that.
Tontamper.
Chetamje Tanya the Rango the Drubius.
Oh,
Turn up a Rango the Drum mess.
Mass.
Did what?
Tiny Rango, you do a maybe, you know, and be couldn't do it. Maybe. Tell you to buy two good doors as usual.
I'll consider this the Marani Shigoda. Turn a Chetamje Tanya the Rango the Druba Shake Shigo, Reslo. Chetamje turned up a Rango the Moduba Shake Shigo.
Oh, really? Rangon Matu Chak Malatilla.
But Rango Janet got to go.
The Rangon Matu Tion you take the Rigio Mata. Rigio Marva. Tontamper Matu, yes.
Yeah, because I want to make sure that he understood the distinction that you told me rather than get his distinction of something. Well, here's the things we know that Baba Viveka asserts that even conventionally things exist intrinsically from their own side. Okay, but things do not exist ultimately, right? Things do not exist ultimately according to Baba Viveka. I think if I understood you. I think you were saying that would it be could Baba Viveka be saying that things do exist intrinsically conventionally, but they do not exist intrinsically ultimately, right? So Khensur may say that in the case of ultimately, there's no need to bring back the intrinsically part. Okay? So it seems like Baba Viveka in his schools, he make a distinction between intrinsic existence, ultimate existence. And perfect existence, some distinctions. So we have to kind of know that part. Okay. Any other thoughts?
But then, since this,
right.
What exactly does that mean? I mean, you gave a number of meanings, but why ultimate should be identical to intrinsic?
Okay,
isn't it better to use the word truly or truthfully? That makes sense.
Right.
Truly instead of ultimately.
Yeah. Korang this cigarette says that penalobe lendenjige ane chedamje rangodu ruba shegi sigorwa ten tambar ruba shegi sigor marwa. That ten tambar del deshe mangu jengma nanda nausarwa. Ten tambar se deshe jorwa. That did deshe savage Jig Dambana Carson was a ten tambar me, Rango the years ago, ten tambar me said that Rango you have in Kebacha or
really?
The Kalisha was that.
Oh.
But I said a tambar me, I'm not happy with those.
Yeah.
That ten tambar me, and color was that.
So don't tamper me, Theatita. 대송소와 단지 얘기 제비나 랑원이 두비아리 단나 가서 그렇지 아주 숙소 놀러 나와 티제 유랑기 피해지 원이 두버다 아주 발로 떡지 저기 니도 지금 저봐 인도 랑어 덥지 유랑기 투모 많이 봐 돌리지 거네 휴지 덥대 위에나 따티 돈 담발 두바 양타
또 먹어 보더네.
가서
그게 죽어지는 차상 영어.
너 파자와니네 콜렌 대바 매베 토네 파조네 뒤 갈때 그랬다. 이 로를 뛰미 뒤. 슬롬나밀 나외 온기 샤보 많이 봐 유랑 투모 많이 봐 돌리 지금 뒤지 드비 인도 발다. 다티. 잠바 좀 두고도. 돈 담바 두고도. 제 유메 쟁게데 단지 공도 해봐나 이 일룩죄비 시럽인데 쟤네. 제 온도 발라 다티 시럽 티응어 마두바티 다 돈 담바 마두바티. This is what you do.
Okay. How do Baba Vivekas differentiate between intrinsic existence, right, and ultimate existence, right? They accept that things exist intrinsically but do not exist ultimately, right? So our challenge is how do they explain that? According to Sevatandika Madhyamikans, Baba Viveka is one of the great masters of this school. They said that, things that appear to our perceptions, such as forms and whatever other images, right? How do they exist? And they appear to exist from their side, okay? So they believe there's something that exists from their side, but there's also our mental projections on it, imputation. So through the combination of labeling and existing from their side, that's how things exist. Yeah, that's why they accept that things exist intrinsically. Yeah. Now they say that things don't exist ultimately. What that means is without depending upon our labeling at all. Something that exists completely 100% on its own, that kind of ultimate existence is not there. Okay, so that's how they differentiate it, Whereas for my second footnote, Chandrakriti, it's not a combination of things. If something slightly exists from each side, then you got it wrong. It has, so that's the distinction, is it? Yeah. So channel somehow. Yes, please, Mike, could you use, yeah. That is able to this able to no. I said that distinction was clear. Yes.
So just as to that subtle distinction,
yes.
Then from the Prasangika view, when for the basis of designation,
right.
When we say that we require a valid basis of designation,
yes.
How is that not wanting something existing from the side of the object itself?
Yes, I understood your question very clearly, which is good news, right? Ta Quran condition this gore. Ta dinde yimba inas, and Oma Tenjo be Logolaya, Ta Kanjanganzo Disungorwa, Daxi Sema, Rava, and Doctor Semas Logorwa. Chetam Jake Daxi the Semas Google, Semas Town Machine Gomarwa. So the Daxi Semas again, the Kodan Kandaja, Daxi Semas is Korean when it's you, then any Chago Marvesa, Daxi Semas. Talk about Tower, the tax Daxi would Sema in good Korean when it's you, then any Chagmatic, Oma Tenju be a kind of station. Now,
Tenju, Tamasing.
Daxi Sama, Daxi,
Daxi, Daxi, Orva. Tana Nazula, Saint of the Shavina, Sea Korangi, Moody to the other Yomariti, Colapa, Seas in a Tayag, Tope Tayag, Takichkurva.
No.
A Ral Seas in a Tabina, a Takiti Tangi Omarva. Takitala, any people, Tope, Tani. Must joke the doctrine, joke the ancient Patope, Tatubala, Tati Aramut Rahim, Matubi Tone, the Tope, Shatam, the Tony, or a Jokti Chavachin, which you are what Jokti Chavani Chin, which you hotel, that his it is.
And that somebody, Paras and this one, and Rango the Jew that will check my vessel. That you might think about
Oh, Marimari,
Daxi,
the kid Samasi will attack Artavata. Conti Hubert Lahinkita. Taxi Samasane Merita, Taxil Samai Kubeta Yomarwada. Con Joji Lotti Caricerita, Tope Pantinici, Rich and Tope. I tell you, Kale Kaiko Chiki over the Tope Shazamdi, Hibuchiki, most young usually. Tia which most seem to be in a short time, Tope Tazam Siati, any pigage goes into your maris. Shoot on the top with some the Tarangi Matuba Rangon Matuba Samba Samrati Lens Gendo. That I don't do that and the chef that he Tamasi you do.
Does it some other teacher was get somewhere?
You the kid Tamasi the Castle that Cheju Castle. Look around that Cheju is town that. Town now on the Takitella pigage and Jobuchuku. Takiti, Tokbati, Taban, Nansingi, MPH, Util and Jobuchuku. The mother he makes a Takitamasian Chataya security. I would think maybe.
Because says it's a little bit hard to explain what is a valid basis, right? According to Pasangigas, yes, all things are merely labeled, but you cannot label anything, everything you wanted, right? That would be a hodgepodge thing, right? So for the label to work, there has to be valid attribution and valid basis, right? Dakshitsema. So some of the examples Khensur has given is like when we call this table, right? The table is the label we've given, but before we named it, whatever is there, that somehow constitute a valid basis to be called table rather than a bed or something, by our conventional experiences, there has to be some kind of a coherence between our, I think my sense is coherence between our ordinary perception experiences and whatever that thing we're going to label it, because we couldn't have labeled this as a bed or this as car or something, because that doesn't, for example, we cannot call a copper or a brass as gold, right? People think, are you crazy? So there's something with the basis that coheres with, right, our perception. That's all he could say. It's kind of difficult to explain,
So
that part.
The objector from the lower Madhyamaka school would say that that's the point where the Prasangika view that looked so good collapses into our view, right? Because that subtle something that is existing from the side of the object itself or inherently existing, truly existing from its own side is exactly the thing that we're maintaining is existing by its characteristics. So it's that little something that's hard to explain that the lower Madhyamaka objector would say, you've just lost your view.
Khensur uma dakasa uma oma pena de logo lengden de khonsur side la uma thinju ba chiran so samje to ba ta sal me chhe san me ba cha do se this segment ko dakshit sema jil wa khonsur dakshit sema yona pina yo ko na wa sha de go wa jaza ta uma thinju be pina yo de dakshit sema la yo mar su go wa lo ja san this side kala jaza dan da di logo lengden de khonsur ge ta chu gyunju se ko mar ba da thinju ba chiran so ko ro de go de se de dil nya ka chu de me ro sa tu go ba sa dakshit sema sha da dakshit sema sha da dakshit sema sha da
dakshit sema sha da la me ro shida che ba shida che yo da de 간에 전부 싫어하리. 다시 참아서데 아니 지당 참아서니지 텐주엔 두고 란주베다 관계 두고 아니 디 참아도 두지 가리요. 참아도 두요야게 tin데 나도 주기 참아때 양조 수 두기리. 다들 가시에 그잖아 라릭 두기리. 텐주 라릭 메데베데 라릭 두고 말이지. 디 참아때 녀에 두고도 나도 가산래가 그리체 메시 들리텔지 제디 벌라 디 참아때 수 두기도 있잖아. 녀와도 두고도 쓰겨다. 다 도도도 제도 딱히 참아 세네티기 가르쳐다. 돈다도 대화도 거리 하고 해마서 딱히 참았으니 되다.
다디 디 샤다다 랑규베 때데 dak시 체마지 비게 코랑은 여버스 나와셔게 나 랑은 두고 와. 다 땡겨베 데 메라도 갈라 랑규베 땡겨러 와. 다시나 군템 쳔부 시부치고도 여버 메라 그래서.
다 군이니부터 가동시다 쳐고도 와. 저게 똑베 상담리. 대마도 비게 유기 땡도 비게 뒤담에 두어요 말이스. 저게 유땡도 두지요 아리스. 유땡도 그 태버지 두어 매베이나 똑베 샤가 짠디 가와다다다 있는 지기요 말이 뜻은 거 알아봐다. 마스터 간에 도와서 또 간에 스타리 다다키 참았으니데 간에리.
I mean, my sense of this whole explanation he was trying to give is, I think, yes, what you raised, I think from Sevatandika Madhyamikan point of view, lower school, they look at something, there is something there before you label, right? It exists from its sides, Whereas the Prasangika is saying not everything is merely labeled, nothing is right. So that could be, and that's why.
Wondering about why we add value
Right,
onto that.
right, and
That's fine.
and so the Prasangika, so the Savatandikas would, critique the Prasangika said, now you are denying the existence of everything because you said everything is a mere label. That makes no sense to it, right? So one of the crux of the matter is understanding that. In Prasangika viewpoint, what does it mean? Merely label. The word merely, the Tibetan is some, is underlined, Once we figure out what that means, then it becomes easier to understand Prasangika's viewpoint of emptiness and all of that. Okay. So that's, yeah. Can you give the mic to, Lynn? Yeah. On? Yeah.
Thank you, Geshe-la and Tenzin. I just have a quick question. It seems to me there are a lot of scholars who spend a lot of time debating about the intrinsic existence and ultimate existence of phenomenon. Is this to establish that all phenomenon are dependently arising and that we shouldn't have grasping and attachment to phenomenon? And
Also, so that's observation you're making, right? We should not grasp at things because everything is dependent arising.
Yes,
okay.
Right.
Yeah. Monakani should be issue or that that under the Karso Shumchambo Nalchabo Monguwa, Rangan the Dubas, Rangan do your Mazda Mongosun the Rova, Ineda, Nangbe Shun Chiga of Shebe, no Chetamje, and a 10 and Dubas at Ares Labarwa. 10 and Duba. 10 and Duba, they said, and a Karso, Chetamje 10 and Duba Sonda, and Che to get some of the young Chaktan should say, or Yamares, Chaktan Chase or Chaktan, just a quality Takalation to go to Vesa. The Chetamje 10 and Duba Sonda, and it Churchilla, she would Zimbabwe, Chakwa the Chiji Yamares, the coordinated to go to Vesa.
타고치기야 말씀. 슈탐제 주단 제 땀이 세거리. 주단 제 땀이 두버리. 주제다 지체도 맞게 돈도에다 내용이 알아봐. 대주도 괜게요. 말제다. 군도 맞게 돈도야 딱히 그래 뜬 두버려와. 뜬이 맞두버잖아. 땡디에기 게디도 냠두고 알아봐. 뜬이 두버다. 지두버다. 아니 피게지 쇼가리 칸데 가이나 쟁인 디바점지. 단지 공원도 휴타라리. 땡인 디바점지 두버리 마도 제기 아니 피게 요 말이 있어야 시거와 땡인 디바점지. 짬세도 땡이라 봐라.
Khensur just says that yes, in the Buddhist literatures overall, we look at across the board, all except that things exist dependently, right? Dependent arising is, commonly accepted reality for all the philosophers across the board. But the dependent arising has many shades of meaning. We talk about dependent arising in terms of cause and effect relationship, or dependent arising in terms of relativity, right? In relation to this, it's that to this, that kind of notion. And then dependent arising in terms of the mere labeling imputation, right? So the whole point of all this discussion is, yes, the reason why we are grasping at things, in a particular way, or we hate some things, in a particular way, is because we misattribute kind of reality is not there onto those things, and then we are grasping it. But once we understand the dependent nature of things, then we let go, right? But that's not how the things are or how things exist. Okay, yeah.
My question's might be a little naive, but the understanding of it all to me seems like there's a lot of focus put on the intrinsic existence and all that. But to me, it's like obviously nothing can exist without the things like a human can't exist without atoms and all that. And so essentially, wouldn't it be pretty much impossible for anything to exist in and of itself? Because something as simple as like an idea, you need the person to think of the idea in order for it to exist.
According to person, yes. Intrinsic reality is an impossibility, because everything is dependent and, connected to some way, yeah.
And then when you said the labeling now, is that the same idea? It's almost like a grouping, like again, you're a human, but it's because you're a group of atoms, and that's what the label would be attached.
Okay, I'll ask him, it includes that, I think, but I'll ask him, okay? Kurang this is that in India, 가서 타니에 담아를 베지신으로 랑면에 두버 요 세가 요 말에 세가 뭐 된담바 두버 요를 좀 먹고 시거로 와 다간에 타면 타슈데 코라 사모타메나 다 직된 감들 차샤와이나 안 상만 내다 찍을 직된 내 되는 거로 와
리지
셈제면은 로아 미생에 대해 요 마시 말로 와 거로 니네 시도가는 랑은 좀 째매 차사로 와서 근데 텐주베 딜라고 알았어 거로 와 따라와 시도가야 프랑스 시도가야 다는 때는 따고 세셔로 와 따고 세비 되는데 먼저 변화 취 탐제 안에 가서 그래 봐 야와세셔로 와 로아 미스로 와 뒤로 셈제세로 와 동대세 비가 거로 와니 따고 되 되는데 그래서 따고 세도 거지 대전 선이 따윤 거로 와
리지
어디 따고 되는데 그래서
깜비통
따고 되는 취 탐제 또가 딱 잠세셔로 와
어디 또왜 딱담리 딱담리 그러나 담나도 뒤로 부춘주 시켰잖아 걸 명요래배 당고 경유는 명년명대 인생에 기여야 안 돼. 기여야 안 돼. 유지 제보라고 저거 뒤에는 꼭건 당불랭아 유지 제보니 내내 나랑도 배 신나테나 시고야 저기 드리시 돼. 요 말이 우두체 야 리베체 아니 콜라 다 유지 제보인데 인생에 다 윤디 말라 다 똑배 딱뭐 점 저기 그 뒤도네 유지 제보 샤와시 두고요래. 유지제부 샤와시 두고 여러봐. 뭐 뒤지도 벌다 그 부춘주 지네 될다 매요 말 명요 말. 저기 다히 세운데 아니 효를 밑에도 기지 가리 통밀래. 다히 지네 그 똑배 딱밤게 비지 그래도 명디도 정당하지 내용이요. 그래서 뭐도 저 디메리인디 지레 제부 저기 잠지에 대가서다. 어때 대 똑배 딱 방론 두고요. 대도 말이 똑배 따당디.
Those social categorizations we do, right? Humans and animals and midgets or whatever, right? We can say, yes, those are part of labeling, because of label. But labeling is more than, in one sense, is more than that. The examples Khensur is given is two. One is like when a child is born, right? The child needs to be given a name, right? The child doesn't come like, this is who I am, right? Call me that. There's no name. So then you decide what name I should give to the child. And let's say the child should be called Tashi. And then hereafter everybody says, oh, this Tashi is over there, right? But there is no child from, how to say, from its own side said, I'm a Tashi, right? It needs to be labeled. Okay? In the same way, when we elect representatives, or in old days we have kings, right? Until somebody is coronated and put on the throne, say, okay, today, hereafter you will be the queen or the king, he or she is not a queen or a king. Right? So this all suggests, in a rough level, what labeling means. But in some sense, labeling also, I think, it goes instead of recognizing something, right? If we say pillar, right, that itself is labeling. We don't have to say pillar verbally, but in our mind we say, that's pillar, those are the pictures, right? Then it's a labeling. Okay, we will stop there and do our dedication prayers. Kange Lode, Tenye Gender, Yenda, Nanda, Rose, Chinye, Dongo, Chishin, Sichin, Yeje, Dogara, Levante, Kanda, Sibe, Senra, Mare, Mudon, Donge, Kizin, Rozo, Gonla, Proje, Daze, Yanla, Troje, Yanden, Son, Roda, Chero, Nyumon, Yalon, Lete, Chado, Troze, Mare, Muse, Donge, Chinye, Junze, Rede, Nam, Donne, Daze, Saju, Tazo, Yanden, Jase, Togo, Joda, Joda, Junye, Gende, Dalu, Jambe, Yanla, Omara, Bazana, Nati, Omara Bazana, Sende, Choje, Tenra, Wese, Dalu, Temo, Mumba, Rapse, Kada, Denju, Shunlo, Tokba, Lodo, Bove, Nawan, Zedo, Demba, Nyame, Denjo, Sezan, Tojo, Tojo, Pendu, Divan, Kara, Yaje, Zomba, Dende, Gile, Sebe, Pedo, Chanjo, Nimo, Shebe, Shunlo, Nanda, Sudim, Sunje, Beda, 남장 조제 냠도 제베 반대 라메 샤라 소와 조군 조베 zemje 상와리니 년조 라제베 로상 장된 베베 베도 니마 아예 강다 체데베 유괴메 셔동와 제고 예den 베제 구도 셰베 장베 서나 요제요. He who has the intuitive wisdom that disperses the clouds of the two obscurations, like the sun shedding a glorious light that is utterly pure. He who understands all meanings whatsoever of perfect realization, from whose heart emerges the lotus holding the books of the perfection of wisdom. Those who live in samsara are the prisoners of ignorance, afflicted by the darkness of suffering. Looking after all the sentient beings with compassion, like a mother looking after an only child, you have a melodious voice of 60 tones. Roaring like a dragon, you wake people from the sleep of conflicting emotions, freeing one from the iron shackles of karma, dispelling the darkness of their ignorance. Thus you wield the sword which cuts down the shoots of suffering. Primordially pure, having reached the 10th Bodhisattva level, the perfect body of higher qualities, the foremost son of the Buddhas, adorned with 112 ornaments, major and minor physical perfections of a Buddha, I bow down to you, Manjushri. Please dispel the darkness of my mind. Om Arabhaja Nadi. I beseech you with the loving kindness of your omniscient light rays to completely dispel the dark ignorance of my mind, thus giving me the intellectual courage and intelligence to understand the teachings of the Buddha, their illustrating treatises and commentaries. O peerless savior and supreme teacher Shuddhodana's son, O the 17 masters and adepts, Nagarjuna and Asanga and so on, O Dipamkar as well as Sovereign Father Tsongkhapa, gloriously appear here today to grant auspiciousness. On the great path leading to the heart of enlightenment, you have traversed by means of the perfect threefold discipline and have enhanced ever higher the realizations of the enlightened qualities. O glorious Guru, we offer our supplications at your feet. Pray return gloriously to propagate the teaching of Lobsang by tying well the sash of monastic disciplinary precepts and generating the altruistic intention to free all beings. Engage in the tantric yogas of the two stages. Think of the unbearable pain of the sentient beings who are enveloped in the forces of 5 degenerations, and to open wide the lotus grove of the Buddha's teachings. May your reincarnation appear soon as a source of merit for us. Namo Buddhe Chato Huntan Tang Tolu Wanto. Namo Divankara Chung Chung Hava Tong Wun Tofu. Kong Lam Dong Chung Hedan Bantai Lup. Tendang Dalo Tuk Chi Chandang Pintang Gaga. Mai Te Suvi Dong Yim Tukai Batang Golo. Rolai Kai Babang Tuvi Bodhi Han Chang. Dong Su Kong Wen Tu Chung Ting Tai Go Sam Le. Jimon Trolai Kong Dong Hin Bai Yapap Lo Sang. Kam Su Da Cha Jak Kong Din Ming Ting Tai Tuvi. Rolai Kodam Tubi Dang Wing Goi Tai Chung Sang. King Chung Ting Tai Du Bai Min Wei Jivan Chung Tai. Tong Long Tong 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 Ko Ba Kam Ba Lo. Tong Di Bi Pho Chao De Khong Ai Mang Lục Nước Thứ. Tu Đa Rong Mai Ba Dai Vân Sang Da Lei.
Rinpoche, Maje, Bana, Jeba, Nyamba, Me, Kone, Kondo, Peva, Sho, Tawa, Rinpoche, Maje, Bana, Jeje, Jeba, Nyamba, Me, Kone, Kondo, Peva, Sho, Jeba, Shoche, Me, Do, Ra, Yende Jambande Sanje Shingdo Meten Dogo Nanda Jangla Jebara Sho Ave Gobe Shingande Penda Malende Digonati Sede Pado Ten Juro Goro Rana Mende Nyata Yame
We have an announcement.